Well, we've got a big update on the potential death of Kim Jong Un. Now, earlier this week, I spoke about this, and I was very skeptical because it seemed at that point that a lot of the reporting that we were getting was quite thin, and that some of the original tweets from like people like Katie Tur, who had their anonymous sources very early on this, saying that he was brain dead. According to U.S. officials, unnamed U.S. officials, ended up having to delete their tweet, and the fact that the first news organization that published anything on this story was I don't know if they're a physical newspaper or just a website, but a news organization in South Korea that is run by North Korean expats and is funded by a U.S. government cutout, which kind of means that they are, in a way, a CIA front, or at least CIA-affiliated group. So in other words, very closely tied to whatever the U.S. officials were that were leaking to Katie Tur, I'd presume. And they also had to delete their story about Kim Jong Un being brain dead. And a lot of all the other places that were still reporting that he was brain dead, seemed to cite either these unnamed U.S. officials, or rather the reports about these unnamed U.S. officials, which had been deleted, or this website from South Korea run by North Koreans that has deleted their story. Now, the other thing that didn't make much sense to me without, hearing the full story was that, well, they're saying that he had cardiac surgery, yet he's brain dead. I would think that if he had cardiac surgery, that, he would have died of some kind of heart problem because they couldn't save his heart or something like that. And a viewer in the comments section was so kind to rudely point out, I should say, that well, obviously, he could have gone brain dead if his heart stopped for too long and then they restarted it. Which is a good point. I just, hadn't considered that particular possibility. I mean, I would have figured if his heart had a problem, he had a heart attack or something like that, they couldn't restart his heart, you would think that would be the end of it. But in fact, or I shouldn't say in fact, in rumor, we are getting word now, we're getting more details from more sources. People who have not, as far as I know, deleted their tweets yet. People who have not taken this story down. Different publications who are not NBC, CNN, or this Daily NK publication, which is funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. We're getting more detailed reports about the supposed brain death of Kim Jong Un from both Japanese and Chinese publications. Oh, and one more thing before I get to those, though. I do want to point out that another thing that really, to me, threw some shade on this story to begin with was that the South Korean government was pushing back against it very strongly, and I would, because I would think that they would have some knowledge if something like this was going on. Like I don't think that they'd come right out and say that, oh yeah, Kim Jong Un is dead. We know that because they're trying to have some diplomatic relations with North Korea. And play nice with them, so they're not going to come right out and say the truth even if they know it. But I would think that they would drop some hint like, oh, we know that Kim is having some health problems, but we don't know the exact details. South Korea's denial of, and again, this might just be how it was translated, but the way that it was translated that I was seeing it, the South Korean government's denial of Kim Jong Un's death or near death, in the case that he's brain dead, was so strong that, to me, if it turned out to actually be true that he was dead, I would think that would, do a lot to discredit the South Korean government when it comes to talking about North Korea. So I didn't think that they were incentivized to be that bold in saying that Kim Jong Un definitely is not brain dead, unless that they knew that for a fact. So I put a lot more stock in that than I guess I do today, because we're seeing more detailed reports, again, still from anonymous sources, or at least semi-anonymous in one case, so which I'll get to. But I guess I'll start with the Japanese magazine, which interviewed a Chinese doctor who had been working in North Korea at the time of Kim Jong Un's apparent mishap here. And the way he recounted what happened was that Kim Jong Un was, somewhere in North Korea. He had chest pains, went to a local hospital, and they immediately called up China and said, "Oh, please, China, can you send some competent doctors because, we North Korean doctors have no idea what we're doing." which is, I mean, it's kind of funny that you can't find one good doctor in your entire country to try and save, your demigod dictator. So the Chinese rounded up a team of apparently 50 doctors from all the most elite institutions in Beijing and flew them out to Pyongyang. But apparently they couldn't wait for those folks to get there in time to do the operation, and so a North Korean doctor ended up having to do it. And I guess they had to put a stent in his heart. And again, sometimes when you read something like this, it's so ironic that you almost think that that this is fake news that they're kind of putting out there just to see if anybody will buy it. But I mean, it sounds like something that could actually be true, given the state of North Korea and how people there have starved for so many decades. But they're saying that the North Korean doctor had trouble operating on Kim Jong Un because he was so fat, and this doctor had never seen somebody who was so fat, and he certainly had never operated on somebody that was so fat, and so he was just digging around in there, cutting away, trying to get to his heart, and couldn't find what he was looking for. He just had never seen such an obese man in his life. And so that in all the time that it took him to put the stent in his heart, and I guess revive Kim Jong Un, that he had the oxygen cut off from his brain for so long that he's a vegetable, no more intelligent than this can of peas I'm looking at. And so this at least is an actual story. It's not just the CIA told me Kim Jong Un is dead. That's it. We have no details. This is at least some kind of event that you can say, that you might be able to corroborate if you find more people. But of course, it's very difficult always to get information out of North Korea, which is why I'm sure this is coming from a Chinese doctor, because the Chinese are really the only people who go in and out of North Korea and could deliver information to the rest of the world. Well, now how this term translates is probably not exact, but they're calling her the vice president of a major Chinese media organization. And of course, if you work in media in China, that's means you're a government mouthpiece. I don't think that they would let anyone operate in media in China if they weren't a government mouthpiece. So maybe I'm just going out on a limb there. But this woman also happens to be, in case there was any doubt where her loyalties lie, her uncle is somebody who is apparently pretty high up in the Chinese foreign ministry. And so she is saying now that she has an anonymous source, but a very good source, who is, I would imagine, someone connected to her uncle, or maybe her uncle himself, that is saying that Kim Jong Un is brain dead and is repeating this same story that I just told you that was recounted by that doctor who was speaking to the Japanese magazine. And, I was going to look into to see if they have any NED connection like that Daily NK website that was reporting this before and then, retracted the story, or rather deleted the story. But the fact that Chinese media is also reporting this and the people connected to the Chinese government are reporting this, the fact that we are getting it both from the American side and the Chinese side, tells me that this is not a matter of either side trying to manipulate the news and create fake news to their own benefit. Both of them are saying the same thing. And so it's becoming increasingly apparent that this is probably true. And like I said in the last video, I didn't say anything with total certainty. I didn't say he was absolutely alive. What I said was, we're going to find out one way or the other, because if the North Koreans are actually trying to hide the guy's body, well then eventually we'll realize that he hasn't come outside in like 6 months, and that somebody else is effectively in charge. And so the North Koreans can't just pretend that the current dear leader, or I guess the dear leader was his dad, I don't know what they call him, the great leader was his granddad. And oh, by the way, Grandpa's birthday was April 15th, and Kim Jong Un did not show up to the party, so that's a pretty big one. I think based on that alone, we could tell that he is at the very least gravely ill. But given these more detailed reports we're hearing about, coming from both the American government and the Chinese government, it would seem that, Kimmy is not going to make it back from this one. And so I can't even begin to get into what the ramifications are for that, because North Korea is such a screwed up country, and the way succession works is another thing that is absolutely nuts. I mean, this is probably going to be something similar to what happened like when Stalin died back in the 50s, to where, Stalin had made it, had worked so hard to make sure that there was no viable successor to him, so that nobody could just off him and then take the throne in the Kremlin. That when he actually did end up dying, that it created a lot of chaos. And so, the Western media has been talking about Kim Jong Un's sister, that I gained a lot of fame, I guess, during the last Olympics, but there's no reason for us to believe that she's necessarily a shoo-in. We have no idea who the other players are and who the other interest groups are in North Korea. So I guess what I'm saying is we should take this at baby steps. Let's just wait and see what happens if North Korea actually does acknowledge that he's dead. What are they going to do then? Then we can start wondering, based on, gosh, well, I mean, we couldn't even at that point. I don't think we're going to have any idea who's going to be the new leader of this place until there actually is one. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.